G'day and welcome to this week's SPCs Unleashed. We have the full crew on board. We've all been poring over the State of Safe survey and reading it carefully and slowly instead of skimming it like I certainly did the first time. And we are in Ali's capable hands until Niko sends us off thinking about chocolate. Over to you, Ali.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's a little bit of a continuation of last week's discussion, right? When we were talking about sort of the learnings and insights of that we got from the European Safe Summit in the beautiful place of Sorrento, Italy. And one of the things that was presented over there was this new report about the state of safe. And personally, I like this kind of stuff. I like this kind of stuff because it is a sort of an accumulation of all types of feedback from the market, from anyone who is, let's say, who's using Safe. So this initiative, led by Dr. Steve Maynor, was started to, well, gather all types of insights from all types of people on how effective is Safe, how is it being used, what are sort of the drawbacks that you see, and trying to package that into really what I think is quite an honest report. For anyone who is interested, it is freely downloadable you could just Google it or visit the website of Skilled Agile. I think you just need to leave a little bit of personal data behind in the sense of you need to add an email address, I think, and maybe a front name and a last name. But anyways, it is freely downloadable and does contain quite a bit. So in this show, we're going to deep dive into our findings. We spent last week either scanning or scrolling through the document. Maybe any one of us used ChatGPT or any AI tool to summarize it nicely, who knows? But we're going to just figure out whether we recognize this statement and sort of check how this report can be beneficial for safe practitioners. Let's just zoom in on that. So, yep, it is reflection time. So, starting in with the True Passion Special Moment Surprise Challenge. Niko, what was yours?
So I was really disappointed. So if you go to slide 16, and maybe Mark can show it, and I know if you go to slide 16, I'm very disappointed. The question is there: what do you do to educate yourself, to get knowledge, etc.? And our podcast is not mentioned there.
Indeed, terrible.
So
Terrible.
even no other things like podcasts or etc. There are cool answers, but our podcast was missing, so very disappointed. No, it's okay. The other thing was if you go to employee satisfaction, it's slide 20, if I remember right. There are some roles there, and how disappointed or how more happier you are in your role. And two stood out, and I know there's also a question about it. We'll ask ourselves about it. Is that the most decrease of satisfaction is for the PO. So POs are most decrease the decrease of dissatisfaction is there. The decrease of satisfaction is there, and the most less increase is for PMs. So PO and PMs seems to make people not really happy. So let's see what do you think later about it? And one last thing after I read the whole report was I asking myself if everybody understands that not every role in Safe is really a job. Do you really hire everything, every role, or is it just a head you have after a different role? So it was just a question that left in my mind after reading the report, because sometimes it seems like people think, I need for everything 100% people having this role. So that was my surprising and shocking and my moments.
Yeah, the nice thing is there's quite a wide spread of roles that have been mentioned in the employee satisfaction page. We're indeed going to talk about that and see what our observations are, or whether we recognize it. How about you, Mark? What did you recognize?
Look, I think I will confess, it was like 5:30 this morning a.m. that I was sitting really carefully looking at the questions you're asking. If there's one thing I had, it really reminded me how critical the mission of our podcast is. Because so much of what we share, and, let's face it, we're all rule breakers. So much of what we share is actually speaking straight to the stuff that the survey talks about. It's just a shame more SPCs don't listen to us for good advice.
And they should. But thanks for for that insight. Indeed, you're actually right. I haven't looked at it that way. There is topics that we've been talking about already for the last what was it again? 43 episodes. Um, almost one-on-one reflection on what is written in the report. Brainwave. How about you, Stefan? What was your sort of surprise?
Well, I'm going back to my passion, and I can't deny my military background, right? Information is crucial. And Mark mentioned it, if you want to be a creative rule breaker, you need valid data. And if you look at the military staff, at the beginning of a planning phase in a staff, the information officer or the guy who oversees all the activities, gathering information, is the most crucial job in that team at the beginning, because you get an order, you have a mission, you need a lot of information to get it right. Or even, as Mark said, there would be kind of a tactical scheme you could apply, but the best leaders break rules to get where they have to be, right? So for me, I like surveys, but I'm skeptical, I'm critical, because back to my days in the army, we had information officers who didn't do a good job. In German, we called them information as a Kreisläufer, information that circles around and hasn't been validated, right? Just been used. And if you use it the wrong way, it's the wrong data, it will influence your actions in a drastic way. So I'm looking forward to our talk today.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's in a way, yeah, I have the same thing with I like sort of unsalted, honest feedback, and blending that into a report means that report is going to be used as truth, and you would like to make sure that that type of data is indeed true. So there's a lot to talk about. So I would say just let's dive right into it. Uh, because it's so related to our day-to-day job. So I'll start directly with the question that Mark pitched, which was we've all spent some time going through the report, and I'm very sure that each of you had this moment of, okay, I did not expect that. So let's deep dive into that. What were the sort of the most unexpected insights that you found, Niko?
The ha effect was another one. The ha effect was it's really hybrid agile a trend. Where are we living? So it's really an old thing. There was a ha moment, but there was one moment after I read everything, I thought some things are missing. This was my surprise. Is missing the whole soft part. So where are the demand or the ask for good change agents? For good coaches, for good consultants. It sounds like, the system is broken, but no data about is maybe the consultancy, the teachers, the speakers, or whatever broken. And that was a little bit my surprise that something was missed or was missing after the read. So moments. So something is.
Yeah, indeed. In page 26, there's a section that is written that there is the data underscores that there is a disconnect between strategic goals of LPM and the operational realities of many organizations, and that certain types of industries, they're struggling to reconcile the flexibility of lean portfolio management with rigid, acquisition or governance framework. So these constraints, they create a hybrid approach where agile practices coexist with legacy systems, and that creates an overlap, inefficiencies, diluted implementation of safe principles, and I recognize that as well. Yeah.
Look, I'll be honest, I thought very carefully about how to phrase this, and the reason I jumped this question of what surprised you is I was sitting there and I just finished going through all my responses to the questions you guys have come up with. There's a truth. I don't think I saw anything in that survey that surprised me. I really didn't. I don't think I saw anything in the survey that I haven't probably felt was true for the last 5 or 6 years. So what surprised me most was that various folks at Scaled Agile found interesting surprises in the survey results.
Nice meta.
Exactly. It would be sort of, next year's State of Safe report would be authored by Mark Richards.
But maybe if I may, Ali, There was also one thing that wasn't really a surprise, but was a surprise, the whole LPM thing. You mentioned it a little bit before. So we know from our experience, LPM is hard. But if you go to data, it seems really to be hard. So around, the pages 22, 24, 26, if people want to read, there's a lot of LPM stuff there. It was a little bit of a surprise to see how bad we are doing. Or
Yeah, there's we're going to talk. There's I think we've prepared a little question as well about sort of the demographics of the respondents, of the people that responded to the survey. But before jumping into that, actually, I think talking or continuing on that topic, Stephan, what was your unexpected insight?
Yeah, I'm heavily influenced and still influenced by one of my professors at university. And he said, database. Where's your database? How did you gather it? And we might talk about that probably at the end of this session as well. I was a bit surprised and I started at the end of the report, the respondents. Many managers, like 1/3 of the job titles indicated it was managers responding to that survey. And when I hear managers and being critical, is it telling a good story or is it pouring in what are the challenges we have? What's the honesty of the respondents? I would have expected more coaches, more SPCs, like over 50%. That wasn't the case. And that would be something that I'm interested in. And perhaps in one of the following surveys that Scale Agile could dig deeper into that one. What is the statistics of the database? And also, how did we come to the conclusions? So looking behind the curtain of a survey is, and I'm with Mark, no any other surprises. It fits with the experience. It fits with some internal survey we did with 40 of our customers. Similar questions, similar responses, probably same flavor, nothing surprised. But what's the database? How did we come to a conclusion?
Yeah,
what we see in the report.
I wanted to be able to quiz the database. I think there was one slide where they called out that there was a big difference in answers between two different roles. When I got to the end and I actually looked at the spread, I went, I want to be able to go, what if you did that same highlight survey finding analysis and you split it by cohort, what would the difference be?
Exactly.
Because I think that would tell a really interesting story about what leadership is perceiving, worrying about, and feeling excited by versus what the coaches are feeling excited by, nervous about, and worried by.
Yeah, and that would be the question about your samples. A little bit more background information. How did we choose the samples? Because at the moment, it's just who responded was in the survey, but how would you sketch the next version of that state report that we have really good valid data for conclusions?
Well, so, there is, different sort of cross sections to look at the demographics. But we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. The report contains quite some insights on what goes well, what doesn't go well, sort of what is sort of the perceived added value of using SAFe, and what is the perceived or maybe even widely recognized difficulty in using SAFe. So let's try to first start with something that goes well, because in the report itself on page 10, there's a section that talks about sort of as a key finding that 39% of the respondents mentioned that SAFe has exceeded their expectations. And, SAFe is huge. We're talking about roles and responsibilities. We're talking about principles. We're talking about an element of mindset. We're talking about governance models or operating models. So it's a very broad topic. So just a question to all of you. What do you see as something that that contributes to SAFe exceeding expectations? And I'll just throw the mic nicely to...
Maybe I'm just a math geek, but I went 39%. Oh, I don't remember the bar graph looking like that. And I looked at the bar graph and, it's all in the careful turn of phrase because the bar graph said 10% exceed, 32% or met or slightly better. So, the number that's been presented is met or exceeded, and the met number is much bigger than the exceeded number. But I also don't get how 10% plus 32% equals 39%. So go figure. Where I got really interested was the comment that individual contributors tended to be much more positive than managers and leaders. And I went, oh, that's kind of cool. And actually, it's a really interesting link if you think about so much of the anti-safe critique out there that, you know, it's something that management inflict on their people so they don't have to change. But it's an interesting insight that it's actually those individual contributors that are actually feeling like it's exceeded expectations. And then I got to the end where it said actually the most dominant respondee was a coach or an SPC. And I went, I wonder how that skews things. So I don't know. It's an interesting one to me.
It's how do you call that? There's a saying in Dutch language where the butcher is grading its own meat. So it's basically there might be some bias in the data. I think that's what you mean.
Yeah, let me pick that. Let me pick that up. Right, we're talking about business agility. We're not talking about implementing SAFe. And that's what I said a few times the last 2 days during a SAFe for Team training. I say, guys, it's about business agility. What does that mean for different cohorts, different people? And one guy at the end, or two guys showed up and said, what we take from this course is probably the most important person in this ramp up to the first PI planning is the RT, not the managers, not what we are looking for regarding business agility. It's setting the stage, right? And the question again will be in a context, and that will be interesting for the next survey. Different context, as you mentioned it, Mark, different people with different perspectives. I'm not talking biases. I'm not talking about the butcher, right? Preparing the meat. I'm talking about the context, because it might be right that the butcher prepares the meat in a certain way because it is a barbecue. Or if it's a Christmas holiday, it's a totally different context, right? And my butcher is really good because he knows his customers. And if you come to the shop, he already addresses you regarding the context. What do you need? So for me, and you were asking for guaranteed success, is how do you start the transformation? And then how you sustain it. And that's probably something I would like to see in the following years, following state reports of the state. How's that moving on? Do we have a stable state? Are we improving with certain structural elements or certain approaches? Because the SAFe framework is moving into the right direction. Scenario based, I do have a problem, I have to solve something. And how is that then reflected in a response on maybe a yearly basis or on a periodical base, right? That would be my 2 cents regarding the key findings and what's probably the question of success. And then having more an eye on or a perspective of how do we set up the stage for success? And not only talking about, yeah, we were successful or we were not successful without having the background information.
How do you set up the stage? It's cool. It's a cool thing. The question was, how do you guarantee this, the success? And Stephan just gave you the answer, is how you set up it. And my answer is always change things with the people, not over the people, or tell them how to do. And I think this is one thing how we can make everything, and almost not just SAFe, successfuler, or more successful, is changing with the people.
Just let's hold on to that axis, changing with the people. In this survey, there is a section that talks about employee satisfaction. We briefly touched upon it in the intro of this episode. It can be found on page 20. There's a whole spread of roles with sort of highlighting the satisfaction of the sort of employee satisfaction of these roles, graded in significant increase, slight increase, no change, slight decrease, and significant decrease. And talking about the most common roles that we'd find in, let's say, the SAFe universe: Scrum Master or Team Coach, a Product Owner, Release and Engineer, Product Manager, Lean Portfolio Manager, the SPC, Business Owner, the Developer or Team Member, an Architect, and there is a bucket for Other. We do indeed see, as I think it was you, Niko, that mentioned that there is the highest decrease, that is slight decrease and significant decrease in their roles, is actually on the plate of the product owner and on the plate of the product manager. And I think architect would be sort of a nice close third place right there. Any idea why that might be the case? I'll jump with you, Niko.
Yeah, I started becoming philosophical in the beginning. So is it about the role itself? Is it the environment? Something? And then I start the morning, I woke up earlier than usually. I started reading the section again. Then I found something in page 32 about resistance to change. Maybe there's, or what the data or what the interpretation of the data is. And I think this is also one important part. On the one side, the system tries to slice the role of a product owner because we are scaling. That makes it difficult. And if you don't think too much, you slice it wrong and you have a powerless PO and completely overwhelmed PM. But there's also maybe kind of a resistance because I was something else before. Maybe I was a project manager or whatever, and now I have to deal with people too, and I have to share my responsibility, power, or whatever. I think it's difficult to find. It's just trying to imagine something from the data thing, except of resistance to change because of former roles. But I think there is maybe we can make a whole episode out of it, digging deeper, sharing our experience.
I put one on the backlog while I was doing the responses this morning, Niko.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. How about you, Mark? So looking at these, the roles that have responded with, let's say, the highest amount of, the relative highest amount of dissatisfaction. Any idea why that might be the case or why that might be happening?
So I think I would have really strong ideas on the product side, and I would have a lot less theories on the architect side. And if I've thought about architect, I instantly go, because of course, once upon a time I was an architect. I hung out and drank beer with a lot of architects, and there's the cynical instant response on the architect that says they lose power. And it forces them to grow and think differently as an architect, and that can be very uncomfortable. And I'm not sure that there are a lot of SPCs out there who can actually help an architect navigate that journey, because you've got to have a certain level of architectural knowledge to do so, and there's not a lot of them. But if I look at the product side, I actually think, there's an element, and Niko spoke to it, right? How's the role being interpreted? But I also go to how is the system configuration influencing it? For example, if you're a complicated subsystem team, what does your product owner do? They don't manage a product, they manage dependency requests from other teams. They generally don't get to have a strategy, right? They're just a triage manager for people screaming for help from the dependency. And I think if you're really truthful about the way a lot of people configure their safe implementations in the beginning, you've got about 90% complicated subsystem teams. So you get some team who builds mainframe services in COBOL, and you go, I need a product owner who really understands the business domain to go and work closely with that team. That product owner is not going to have a lot of fun, because the team's not going to want to talk about business problems. They're going to want to talk about mainframe COBOL. The product owner is going to be very uncomfortable, because if you've got somebody who should be a product owner, they probably don't know how COBOL works. Getting that match to go, if you've got a stream-aligned team or a true platform team, not a pretend platform team configuration, like a disguise on a complicated subsystem, right? Yeah. You can get somebody in a product role who gets to actually do the product stuff. But if you get somebody on a complicated subsystem team, to be honest, I often go, let's not even put a product owner on that team, because there's not much point, right? I'd rather have a scrum master who can help the team triage their dependency conflicts. And so getting to that point of, how are you configured? How does that influence your interpretation of the role? And I think, if you look at the critiques of the role, say from the SVPG guys, they would say, well, the product owner doesn't feel much like a product manager. And that's true, because a lot of, historically, the safe product owner role was very wired to be, assuming you're going to work with a complicated subsystem team. And then funnily enough, more recently, it's like, oh, you're going to be customer-centric, but actually you can't really be the customer-centric, amazing product owner that you're being taught to be if your job is to manage dependency conflicts as opposed to carve out a product strategy. So that for me is like instantly where I go to with why are people struggling, because are they being set up for success?
Yeah, let me pick up that thread. I think what Niko and Mark said is really important, right? Different aspects on the transformation journey. Have a look at the PO. The PO is probably not the product owner, because you as the content authority who brings in the why and the what, you with your team are a contributor to something much bigger. Again, systems thinking, products of products, systems of systems, right? And now I think, and that's probably one aspect I will bring in, transparency and creating information coherence with these different roles, content authorities, design authorities, and then giving them some guidance because they are transitioning into a new role or part of their role is changing, that might be perceived as a restriction. It's framing where you have your area of self-organization. But again, it's not about the individual. It's about ultimately business agility, all the portfolios with the value streams in it, the solutions, and that creates probably some havoc. That creates some troubles for these guys, right? That's one aspect. The other one is communication of the understanding of the roles, and you mentioned that, Niko, right? We do a lot of role-based training in the ramp up to the first PI plannings. I try to talk to these guys at the beginning of those role-based trainings about you are an authority. And by the way, you mentioned that, Niko. We're now in the hardware area. A PM in the hardware area is more an amalgamation of a PM and an architect or a lead engineer, right? Yeah. And just in this Safe for Team training we had two types of PMs. We had PMs from the operational part of the enterprise, and we had the PMs who are lead engineers creating hardware. And both sat at the table, they looked at each other and they said, we probably need a better collaboration. We had first of all, we do have a problem. We both call ourselves PMs. Let's clarify that. So we had an adaptation, and that took a lot of pressure out of the situation, right? So for me, it's and handing over to you, Ali. It's what you mentioned in the preparation. It's about this knowledge work, being a knowledge worker, having purpose. That's a systemic thing, right? Then showing your mastery. You want to show that you are good, but then kicks in autonomy. What is decentralized power? What is the centralized aspect of a system or even a transformation? And there's two things, transformational stuff and working on the systems or the solutions, right?
So what I hear is, as a product owner, what do you still own whenever we go safe?
Right.
Yeah.
Are we really owning a product or a section of the product? Or what Mark mentioned, are we owning dependency management responsibilities? Versus what I also heard was there is, if I'll rephrase it a bit, there's much more, trying to make this whole dynamics amongst teams work. So we're much more focused on processes and ways of working and gaining transparency and just making that machine work, rather than the focus on product delivery, the right building the right features in the right product for the right types of users. There's more, as you mentioned, Stephan, as a consequence of scaling, there's much more responsibilities to just get this machine operational. And yeah, I see that as well. I think it is a consequence of scaling, which makes it potentially makes the role a bit less desirable. What does make any role desirable, ladies and gentlemen, is a box of chocolates, because that's what our jiggle is going to be about. Because Niko,
What a segue that was.
Oh yes, Niko came up with one of his unique jiggles again, and I'll just read it out loud. I'm very curious about your results, gentlemen. So if I shouldn't do this with a Forrest Gump sort of way of talking, you shouldn't do that. But so if this survey is like a box of chocolate, what does your chocolate box look like? Mark, let's start with you.
I have to admit, I was telling the guys before we came on air, I've spent the last 3 days just buried in building automated custom AI agents and chatbots based on knowledge bases from our transcripts and things. And I loaded the State of Safe survey in as well. And I historically, every time Niko throws me a jiggle, I go to ChatGPT to try and figure out an answer to the jiggle. And this week I went to my new under development chatbot to fire the jiggle off. And one day I'm going to keep a library of all of the ChatGPT conversations Niko makes me have. But anyway, I had the told you so truffle assortment. The box didn't blow my mind, but it did confirm that I've been shopping at the right chocolate store. It's comforting to have the survey confirm my beliefs about the common challenges. And now that Scaled Agile has the data in hand, there's a better chance we'll see meaningful change. Would you like a box?
A dozen, please.
Nice. How about you, Niko?
For me, it's always two phases. The first thing is write in a jiggle and think, oh, it's a cool one. And then the next phase, oh gosh, I have to answer it myself. And then when I was in the answering mode, I always see the box of chocolate I give away for Christmas to my mom or for Mother's Day. By the way, it's tomorrow. If you haven't gone shopping, go. And it has always a nice layout, a classic layout. It looks really beautiful from the outside. But as Mark mentioned, somehow you know what's inside. If not, you just have to turn the box around and then you see a summary or you see a table of contents. So in this case, oh, there's this and piece, and we can expect that and that flavor. And then you open the box and you ask yourself, okay, why there is a cookie in it? Oh, it's the AI cookie. It's also part of it, but it wasn't labeled on the outside of the box. But it tastes what you expected, even if it wasn't declared on the box. And the other ones, you know them, and you eat them and say, oh, yeah, I forgot how the taste was, but it's how I remember it. So a nice box, you see it regularly, well designed, nice ingredients. And sometimes some surprise cookies or chocolate parts which shouldn't belong there, but they were there and we're okay.
Nice. Thank you. How about you, Stephan?
Yeah, the older I get, the smaller the chocolate boxes become. Why is that? It's too tempting. Too much chocolate, not good for me. So how do my chocolate box look like, or boxes look like? There are the simple ones, all the same type, but also I like the more complex assorted ones, right? Lindensprüngli, the famous chocolate boxes where you have different types in it. So you can choose according to time of the day, your mood, but that's also again tempting, right? Maybe you should try something else. Otherwise you follow your own path, your old path, as it was the last 10, 20, 30 years. And for me, a survey should also trigger some different behavior in the future for me. So maybe I'll choose some different chocolate boxes in the future.
You know what I figure? This question has been asked by and is also answered by some chocolate connoisseurs from Switzerland. So that's there's no match.
But Ali, the Belgians wouldn't agree, right? They wouldn't agree.
That's true. So our sort of downstairs neighbors will sort of revolt, and I'll see those revolts in the comments.
I've just had running through the back of my head the whole way through the jiggle segment, Niko's chocolates that he always takes to Safe Summits, which is this huge box full of chocolate bars in all kinds of different colours. And you look and you go, oh, I wonder what flavour's hiding behind that colour. And he goes, don't worry, they're all the same inside.
Branchly, they really have different colours, but they're all the same. It's just all the same.
Niko has just a separate suitcase that he brings with him only for chocolate. If I see the survey as a box of chocolates, then what kind of chocolate box would it be? I think it would be one of those boxes that indeed have an endless amount of bonbons in it, but each of them tastes different. They might look alike, but they taste different. A lot of variation in there. What also has quite some variations is how roles are being used. Or let me rephrase it. In the survey, there is a whole section about how there's a little bit of fake change happening. How Craig Larman would call it, fake change that happens in transformations. This is nothing specific to SAFe. This is whenever a change happens, and it's somewhere on page 6 where there's a little bit of an explanation that a lot of SAFe practices, but also the roles, are in a way done next to the existing way of working. We briefly talked about this hybrid approach, the hybrid way of working. There's I think a lot of nuance there, or interpretation there, what it means. But because of that, you'd still have 2 governance models. You'd have, responsibilities for one role, but also responsibilities for a traditional, let's say, existing role. There are companies that have been, in a way, rebranding a meeting or rebranding a role, just giving it a new name. So a question to all of you gentlemen, what kind of roles do you see are overloaded, are rebranded? Why do you think that happens? And what does that mean, I think, in general for any company trying to adapt safe? And I'll start with Stephan.
Yeah, well, let me use the analogy of soccer. The question is, what kind of game do you play? And I'm talking not kids games. It's a serious game if you go into a transformation. And I've seen some of these games looking like playing backyard soccer in Champion League t-shirts. It's still backyard soccer, right? And you can't pretend this is Champions League. You have to transition through the National League. You have to qualify to be in the Champions League. Roles are good because you need the goalkeeper, you need the defender, you need the striker, you need some tactics. All good for me. But the question again is, how do we lead that transformation and then talk about renaming some roles? I don't care if you're called an RTE or if you are the Emperor of China. I don't care what's on the business card. I'm caring about your role in the team, right? And you can rebrand, you can rename, and sometimes it's really useful. As I mentioned before, in a hardware context, a PM is not a PM. It's more like a lead engineer with a good perspective on, yes, we are delivering dishwashers, we are delivering kitchen appliances, and there's a PM out there in the market who does market sensing, who does market research, all that stuff. And if I'm not close to this guy, and in the soccer game, maybe even we are the strikers, right? So we have to play together. So that will probably be my answer to, in a more generic way, how I would handle the different situations. And every transformation is different. But based on the principles that we have in the framework, which are really useful, this should be always the final kind of sign of why do we change something. But again, you can't play two games at the same time because you are only on one field and you are part of one team.
You triggered now a firework in my head, Stephan. Let's tell you another story. I didn't wrote it down. Once I had Alistair Coburn in a meetup in Zurich, years, really decades in my head, decades ago. And I asked him, what do you like about SAFe in a public environment? Asking Alistair Coburn, what do you like about SAFe? And he said, after a long pause, because I knew he was a little bit bashing in LinkedIn, Twitter those times. And they said, what I really like is the glossary, because usually when I go to a client, I need days finding the common vocabulary. And then going back to Stephan's picture, you're playing soccer. If you play, it's independent if you play it in the Champions League or on the outside on the streets. You still have the same names somehow. You have a goalie, you have a defense, you have a ball, you have a goal, and so on. Playing soccer on the fields, outside the streets, and in Champions League, you have some differences, and maybe you have to change some things there. But the game and the name should be the same. So I realize there are some differences sometimes because some names are burned already before. So I once was with a client, you wasn't allowed to say Kaizen because they had an HR movement called Kaizen and they destroyed everything. So if you go with lean and say Kaizen, it just would say, open old wounds. So with one client, I wasn't allowed to say value streams because they did something with value streams and it was really horrible. I had to use the German word for it, even if it's the same. But saying value streams in English was like, no, go away, something like that. So sometimes you have to change these things, but try to be on the glossary because it's one of the big pluses. What I change is the other questions. Sometimes I change things, and usually I change epic owner, epic, etc. Because if you go to the homepage, what an epic is of Scaled Agile. Also, the reason why I'm doing it is because epic is a homonym. You have it in Jira, you have it in Scrum. Epic was there before, and if I say epic, IT guys don't understand me, and business guys don't know what I'm talking about. What alien language is this? And I usually use initiative as a synonym. And if you go to Epic, the first sentence is, epics are significant initiatives. So please call them initiatives. Yes. There are initiatives. But yeah, that's what I changed just to connect with people.
Got it. Thank you.
It's
Mark.
I'm going to jump. Niko had a side question that kind of paired with this, which was, what have you renamed and why? And I thought about it and I went, actually, it would be easier to say, what haven't I renamed? I've had this standard line that says, I don't care what you call it, as long as you all call it the same thing.
Right.
Let's find out the language you're using at the moment. And instead of you having to live in this mental translation all the time, let's grow from the language you've got today. And some of those things we might need to create something very different because you haven't got anything that smells at all like that. But, you've got to anchor in the customers. Every organization has a language. And when you go in and you coach there, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to learn the organization's language. And the more you can speak to them in their language, the more impact you can have, because then the translation burden's on you, not on them. And so, find the language. But I think also it's idiotic to think you're not going to be in some kind of hybrid setting. If you're really using systems thinking and you're going, actually, it's the whole enterprise, like it or not, for a long time, and they're trying to figure out, I think, how to get out of this at the moment, but forever, if you weren't part of an agile release train, you couldn't be part of SAFe. That was the easy definition. If you worked in a frontline operations team that would never logically be part of an art, then you by definition almost couldn't be doing SAFe, because if you weren't part of an art or part of a portfolio that managed arts, you weren't doing SAFe. And there's plenty of us who found contextual nuances to that. But there was a reality that says forever, there are a lot of problems to solve that a release train was not the right solution to. And you had to be open to going, there are many things out there. How do we as an organization adopt the right blend of tools and techniques for the right situations? And if you can acknowledge that and you can actually do it deliberately rather than doing it accidentally and have the organization be incredibly confused because there's 3 different languages running around, life's good.
I would like to add something what Mark said for the audience, not to take the wrong summary. So, I heard a SAFe fellow change everything, so I'm okay to change everything too. He said something differently, not that change everything. He said, use the language that people are using already. Yeah. So to be able to connect with them and not just invent everything yourself. So don't invent a new vocabulary. You use the things people are using. So you're able to connect. And I see a lot of people just inventing everything new with a new vocabulary, and then you have the worst of both. You're not connected to the enterprise, and you're not connected to the standard vocabulary. But yet, using the vocabulary you have in the company helps you. And this was what I want to add, because sometimes people may take the wrong summary.
Yeah. And the thing is also, the moment that you're inventing something completely new, 1 year, 2 years down the line, there's some new colleagues joining the company, and they're like, what does this mean? This specific, what is it, this initiative? I have no idea what it means. You should be able to refer to some form of a body of knowledge, whether it is internally managed or whether it is, the SAFe Skilled Agile Framework website, just to remain consistency. Maybe as a last question to all of you, as to end the show. Somewhere in the framework, in the summary, page 37. There is a little bit of a description that we've talked about this a million times, that apparently it still exists. There's this perception that SAFe or the framework is too big and we need to implement it all at once, and therefore it is too heavy, it's too much governance. And apparently that thought still exists. Now, we know fully well that that's not how you implement SAFe. You don't implement everything. I don't think anyone has ever tried that even, but apparently the perception is still there. Respondents demand things like a more simplified documentation, role-based guidance, and maybe a sort of a leaner way of implementing the framework or the way of working. So, question to all of you: what do you think would be a good idea, the next version, installation, the next iteration of SAFe?
Just while I'm busy scanning for that slide to see if I can bring it up. If you sum it up, right, SAFe's been, it's 15 years. It's been about go SAFe, right? The whole machine has been go SAFe and go SAFe in part of your organization, and then grow and go SAFe in other parts of your organization, and just keep going. The world's moved on. I thought there were really interesting stats, right? 63% of respondents said their organization had been 5+ years on the Lean Agile journey. 23% said 11+. Nobody's still back at the beginning. I think when I read that, if I'd read it a year ago, I would have gone, when is SAFe going to wake up and acknowledge that? But I actually think, for me, the whole direction SAFe Reimagine's been taking, and you look at, say, the stuff that Andy has been working on in the configuring safe area, the various things happening in the safe reimagined space, they're pivoting and repositioning. If you look at what's happening with perhaps some of the training, SPC coming out, it's no longer you're beginning, it's you're progressing. How do you get the extra skills and knowledge to move from where you are because you're in a different place than where you began? It's I think that's a bit of feedback that they've obviously heard and been acting on for a good year or so now, right?
Yeah, indeed. Moving into the right direction, simplifying a bit, making it more role specific or industry specific. How about you, Niko? What are your sort of insights?
I changed the question a little bit. So if I had a magic wand, what I would like to do, because I know it's quite impossible, because it's a really complicated problem and I'm coming with a simple solution. I would love to have something like a mapping problems to solutions and saying, for instance, we are recognizing trends too late. Okay, just start with LPM. We would like to have the budgets that way. Okay, start with LPM. We are bad in time to market. Start with that and that. And I know it's not so easy to find such a mapping, but if I had a magic wand, I would be happy to just. There are some problems, and if I have these specific problems, maybe I should have start with this place or this spot of safe. I tried this with a client, by the way, this year. Because they wanted to have safe, and I hate when people say, I just want safe. I just want to know why. And we realize portfolio isn't really important at the moment. So, the pain is somewhere else. But they started with the mandate, we want to have you to install safe. And I'm not an installator. I'm a coach. I'm a systemic coach. And that's what I try to do with them. So these are the problems. Which part of safe can help you? And it wasn't overlapping, so that's why I know it's not an easy thing. But this would be cool to create your own path depending on the things you want to solve, or the problems you want to solve.
And there's an update coming on the discipline pages on that front, right?
Cliffhanger, the next episode. No, Mark.
I was just scanning to see if it was live yet, but it's not. So watch this space.
How about Stephan?
I'm thinking. You asked for what would be a good idea for the next save, and I think I'm with Mark. It's a constant evolution, right? And for us, save is really going into the right direction. Moving away from this question, what's the next big thing? What's the next version? It's a constant evolution. And going back to what I already mentioned is, and Niko, you mentioned that as well, we are not implementing SAFe. We have to respond to needs to really create business agility. And business agility for me is similar to, do we have a viable system or a viable enterprise? Are we really exploiting the business models we have in a good way, in a very effective and efficient way? But are we also exploring, like you said, Niko, the trends? Are we future-proof in a way that when the trend really materializes or starts gaining ground, that we are able to respond? To answer your question, Ali, what could be the big picture? And SAFe is doing that, is asking that question as well, trying to find a good picture, having different starting points for different people, different contexts, different industries. And I like that. I'm looking forward to see what's coming up, the new big picture, right? The other thing I'm thinking about, since I'm part of this kind of movement for being an SPCT, is we have a lot of recursiveness in parts of the system, which demands good leadership. So we talked about team level, team of teams. You mentioned it, Niko. If there's a need for coordination across value streams, why not start now? Why always deferring stuff? Yeah, that comes later. On the implementation roadmap, it is after a few trains. If you need it with the first train, because you still have lots of, and Mark mentioned it, the hybrid situation with hundreds of projects, let's start with it, right? So this responsiveness, this is the stuff I would like to see on a big picture. And I'm sure technology, AI, and the like, they will allow us to come up with something much, much more crisp and how would I say, much more inspiring than what we have at the moment with the even simplified big picture.
Thanks a lot. So basically, simplification, but also making it more specific. Well, I think that Niko's segue is a nice one, sort of problem-oriented, having a different starting point for transformation. Really good ideas. I haven't even thought about that. So I'm going to take that with me. And talking about that, on what we can take with us, what is, if we summarize this entire episode in just one takeaway, what would it be, Stefan?
Well, let's get back to the basics of a survey. A survey for me is valid enough if it uses a sufficiently large and representative sample. And we've seen over 50% from the Americas. How about the rest of the world? And a survey for me in the future, and it's like a wish to the good work the Scaled Agile guys are doing. It reports results in a transparent way. It already does that, but also including the uncertainties. So it's not, this is the answer. This is more like a range or an area we have to consider for the future.
Thanks, Stefan. How about you, Niko? Your takeaway.
I was trying to find translation of what I want to say in German, but I wasn't able to. So I stick with my original one. I just want to say to Stefan, if you look per capita, we have many Swiss people there. So I think Swiss are dominating the survey. No, per head or per capita, I think it's the English word. So my just one takeaway, which was missing a little bit from the survey, was coaching, change management skills are important.
Thank you. Short and sweet, just like some of the chocolates that you bring with you. Mark?
I'm going to stay with Niko and probably in a slightly different way. Where Niko and I are so fundamentally aligned is the crucial nature of coaching and change management skills. And, we've all talked about that a lot in our many of our episodes, but they're still not really on the roadmap. So, it's like if you look at so many of the questions in there and the answers coming, I wonder the influence that coaching and change management skills might have on that and what correlation you could see between some of the different data points.
Full stop. Thanks, Mark. My takeaway, also just listening to the three of you gentlemen, it seems that there's still quite some dogma around SAFe, whether it is about the implementation of SAFe, whether it is about how roles are being sort of adopted in the context of the organization. It's done next to the rest of what we already have. So it seems that there's still a lot of dogma, and we've talked about that already many times in these episodes. Apparently, it's still there, and I remember that there's a whole community in the sort of the agile space that for quite a long time has been talking about, to scale agile, you actually need to descale, and it is something that we're trying to that we're seeing is happening with SAFe. But that's sort of my takeaway. We're trying to figure out what are we going to reduce, what are we going to expand, and it's I think that it generates some nice and exciting times ahead of us. With that, I think we went through quite a lot of data, quite a lot of material of the SAFe, the State of SAFe survey. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for doing the homework, and thanks for whomever has been watching and listening into this episode. I would say let's put a nice bow tie around it and end the show. And with that, I'm giving the microphone back to Mark.
All right. Thank you, sir. And next episode, we are on the new SAFe disciplines. And the good news is we are not doing 21 episodes on the new SAFe disciplines.
Oh, we're not? Oh, okay.
Sadly not.
There are 115,
Cool.
So Stephan will be taking us on a journey that no doubt will involve sporting analogies and military analogies.
Have you seen the jiggle already?
No, I haven't seen the jiggle, but I was thinking about it as I made that comment.
It looks good. It looks good.
All righty, folks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.